Hey guys, welcome back and thanks so much for being here. Thanks for joining me for episode number 3 of MMA After Dark. Before we get started, hit that subscribe button, tap that like button. Doesn't cost you anything and it sure means a whole lot to me. This is going to be my very late reaction and analysis video for UFC 313. I know I'm very late to the party. There are some reasons for that I'll get into shortly. Kind of a funny story, but nevertheless, better late than never. Um, Upon deciding what content to provide you guys today, I was kind of at a toss up between doing the Apex event we just had or going back to UFC 313. But MMA Twitter is still very much buzzing over UFC 313, much more so than the Apex card we just had. So I'm going to do a breakdown of all the fights on the main card from UFC 313, um, reactions, analysis, what's next for the fighters, and my take on what happened at UFC 313. Some great fights, some surprises. Um, a couple. Well, I don't want to say a couple. Definitely, there was a dud on the main card for sure. I'll get into that in a little bit, but pretty good card all the way around, entertaining, and provided us with a lot of good fights. So we're gonna go ahead and get right into it. This is going to be my official UFC 313 reaction and analysis video. Thanks for joining me. So, guys, first, let's get into it. I fully intended to, before a couple weeks ago, going on vacation to Mexico, I fully intended to do a prediction video before the fights. I was in Mexico. My wife and I were vacationing in Cancun. Uh, Meant to do and post a video from our hotel in Cancun. The Wi-Fi there wasn't great, and also too, I didn't have all of my recording, equipment, and so I mean the quality of the video wouldn't have been that great anyway. But nevertheless, I did want to do that, but I just wasn't able to get it uploaded. And then on our day of traveling back was actually the day of the fights. And so we were in the airport, and then I was watching the fights actually mid-flight. If you can believe it, I was watching it on Delta Wi-Fi, but I still was able to watch them all. But upon returning to the states, got a pretty bad flu, and so which also put a pause in the uploading of my reaction video, this video, because I just was not in any kind of place to make any kind of content. I was quite sick with really bad fever most of this past week, so barely started feeling like myself again probably a couple days ago. So again, kind of battled with like, okay, do I do this video a little bit late, or skip it and move on to the Apex card? But again, there's a lot of people have a lot of thoughts, opinions, feelings about particularly the main event of UFC 313 on Kaliv versus Pereira. There's a lot of accounts and fans going back and forth, different scorecards, different takes on what happened. Um, the results of the results. So we'll get into it momentarily. But before we start, I wanted to shout out uh, a fighter, a UFC fighter, Nazim Sadikov, um, ran into in LAX. Wife and I left from LAX to go to Mexico pretty late, and uh, we were walking by TSA checkpoint uh, right before you enter, and I saw someone that looked strikingly like Nazim Sadikov. And I walked by him and I was like, is that him? I'm not sure. I certainly didn't want to embarrass myself, but hey, are you Nazim Sadikov? Right. And so, first I walked by him, kind of did a little double take, still wasn't sure. He was seeing, it looked like he was seeing off some friends or family or something like that. He wasn't walking through TSA or anything like that. But we walked by to use the restroom before going into TSA. And as we were walking back, I see him start to shadow box. So I'm like, okay, that has to be that has to be him. And if not, hey, whatever, right? So I approached him. I said, hey, are you Nazim Sadikov? And he was like, yeah, I am. So I introduced myself, told him I was a fan. Super cool guy. Um, Snapped a picture with me. Super cool guy. I mean, clearly he wasn't there for anything fight related, just minding his own business. But took a few moments out of his day to take a picture with me and chat with me a little bit. And so just super cool guy. So yeah, we love Nazim Sadikov over here at MMA After Dark. So shout out to him. Shout out to you, Nazim Sadikov, for taking the time to take that picture with me and chatting with me for a few minutes. Um, so yeah, got to Mexico. Um, Knew it was going to be tight seeing the fights, and um, viewing was going to be a little bit tricky. Hoped and prayed that Delta Wi-Fi would provide me with streaming capabilities, and they sure did, man. Shout out to Delta Airlines. I've actually paid for premium Wi-Fi on other airlines, and it's still not being able to cut it as far as like even like streaming like Netflix and things like that. But this was actually their free Wi-Fi. You just had to put in your Delta Sky Miles and account, and then it provided you with free high-speed Wi-Fi, enough to stream the fights mid-flight. Who knew? So thankfully, I was able to watch the fights on the plane. Um, I did start to feel pretty sick though coming back that day. That was when everything kind of started to hit me. I was actively tweeting, or trying to at least, during most of the fights. And then I think it was during the Ignacio Bahamondes versus Jalen Turner, where I just really like my head started to feel huge, and I'm like, okay, I can't keep up with both. Tweeting and trying to watch the fights and do some analysis of it in my own head, as we're mid-flight. So I paused the tweeting and tried to focus in on the fights, and I was kind of in and out of sleep for a little bit. It was a red eye flight, so take that for what you will. Um, but yeah, the main card provided us with some good entertainment. But we'll start with the main event, which was interesting because the main event started right when we were landing in back in LA, and which was very tricky because here I am trying to watch on my phone while deboarding the plane, going through customs, and just trying to like glance up and do what I got to do, go to baggage claim, and do everything while still trying to pay attention to the main event. I was hoping that by the time we landed, all the fights would have been wrapped up, but unfortunately, I was still a little bit um, attending to some other business during the main event. But I was still trying to watch as carefully as I could on my phone while we were getting our business sorted at the airport. And upon first watch, um, I very much thought that Ankalaev won this fight pretty decisively. Now, granted, watching it on my phone, again, deboarding the plane, going to baggage claim, doing all this, right? Doing all this stuff, trying to get back to our car. And so, was I watching attentively as I normally do? No, I wasn't. I had my headphones on. I was listening to the commentary, trying to get a feel for what was happening. Um, and again, upon first watch, I really was convinced that going into that fifth round, that Alex was going to need to finish, or at bare minimum, really just have a monster round where he just really put a beating on Ankalaev. Neither of which occurred. I did think that Alex did win that fifth and final round, but let's go back to the beginning of the fight. And again, this was upon first watch. Um, and I did rewatch it again earlier today, and it's interesting. It's so interesting how things can change upon second rewatch, and not just with this fight, but I I can't tell you how many fights I've watched in the past where watching it in the moment, pay-per-view. Um, I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting what a second or even a third rewatch will do, especially if it's a close fight. And this certainly was round by round. These were close rounds. Um, but like most of you out there, I did score the first round for Alex. I thought the story of the first round was the leg kicks. I thought he did some good work on the legs. Those calf kicks started to add up. I thought it was a pretty easy round to score for Alex. I thought that that first round definitely belonged to him. It seemed to be the consensus throughout, MMA Twitter, commentary, whatever it will be, right? And then we get into the second round. Um, Ankalaev bounced back in a big way that second round. I thought that Ankalaev landed the more damaging shots. There was a couple, 1-2 he landed in about the middle of the round, and then of course we know in that into that round he landed probably the biggest shot he landed definitely was in the end of that second round. Kind of like stumbled Alex and had him against the fence, and he definitely took that second round. And then we get to the ever important, it seems to be controversial third round, and when I went back and rewatched it today, and not just the third round, but the fight in total, I really expected my first initial thoughts, my first initial take of the fight being that Ankalaev won pretty decisively, to be reaffirmed. So I'm at the gym and I'm walking on the treadmill and I'm all in, right? Just 100% focus and attention on the fight. And in particular that third round, I really wanted to make sure that I paid extra close attention to that third round because that seems to be, uh, excuse me, out of all the rounds, the most contested. We see different scorecards. Fans have different opinions about that third round. Um, and it's interesting because they put up the significant strikes by round um, during the fight. The broadcast put them up. And I remember the first time watching it thinking, like, man, these significant strikes don't seem to be matching with what I'm seeing. Because again, I'm watching this thinking, like, man, like, okay, Alex won the first round, and then upon first watch, Uncle Ive won the second round, won the third round, won the fourth round, and then we get to the fifth round. But again, that first watch, I went into it thinking that going into that fifth round, thinking that Alex needs something big in that fifth round um, to seal the deal. But upon second watch of the third round, I think Alex edged it. I really do. Um, I think that he he really went back to work on some of those kicks. It was definitely a little more of a a tit for tat round. That's not to say that Ankalaev didn't have his moments in that round, but I do think that Alex did edge out that third round. Um, and but again, it took that second rewatch to really hone in on that third round, that ever important third round. Do I think that a scorecard turned in for Ankalaev that gave him the third round is a travesty? No, I don't. And to be clear, I don't think that Ankalaev winning this fight is a robbery. I'm not one of these guys screaming robbery at all. I think that Ankalaev having Alex on the back foot majority of the fight. And I think the clinch work he did against Fence, and I know it's not the most exciting thing to watch, but it is a part of the sport, and it can be used to get victories. And in this case, I think that Ankalaev making that adjustment was smart because you keep standing with Alex, uh, even if he is having an off night. Pretty risky business when he's got that equalizer in those jabs and in that ever dangerous left hook and those kicks. Um, so I think that Uncle Ive made some smart adjustments. Actually, is it the most fan friendly way to win a fight? No, of course not, and we know this, right? But um, that being said, I went back and watched that fight. That third round, I think Alex edged it just enough, and I do think actually that the significant strikes that they showed mid-fight in that third round um, were pretty accurate. I think that in totality, um, I think that Alex edged out those significant strikes, the legs, some of the jabs. Um, I think the problem that Alex found himself in, though, was that Ankalaev seemed to have the bigger moments, right? And the rounds that Ankalaev did win, he won. Ankalaev looked better in the rounds that he won as opposed to the rounds that Alex won. When I say the rounds that Alex won, I'm saying even for my own personal scorecard. I think that even though I'm officially turning in a 3-2 scorecard for Alex, I think even in those two rounds that I scored for Ankalaev, I think he probably looked a little bit better than Alex did in those other rounds. that combined with the fact that Uncle Ive really had him on the back foot, he made him uncomfortable. I mean, guys, let's be clear. I mean, we can't watch that fight and think that Alex was just in his flow state, in his zone, like we see him so often. Even in the Khalil Roundtree fight, even it took him a couple rounds to get going, but you always felt that like, okay, Alex is about to turn it on any minute, right? He's making his reads, he's getting his distance, he's getting his footing, and he's gonna end up exploding. And that's exactly what he did in that Roundtree fight. But Alex just he couldn't seem to really get out of first gear in this fight. We didn't see those really damaging shots, those jabs that we just see Alex just flow out, put out there so effortlessly, and it just seems to make these guys just faces just explode, right? I mean, we just didn't see that. I know there's been reports that supposedly he was dealing with some sort of sickness, and even I've seen a report that's gone as far to say that he entered that fight with a broken hand. I mean, look, only Alex knows. Bottom line, guys, he took the fight. Can't hold that against Ankalaev, right? I mean, all he can do is show up and fight. And I thought Ankalaev had a pretty smart game plan. But I will say this though, and this is really why I ended up picking Alex. I mean, we can talk about the power in the left hand, we can talk about the kicks, we can talk about the toughness, the cardio by and large, but I ultimately picked Alex in this fight because of his fight IQ, and which is something that I think Ankalaev has shown to have been lacking in some of his previous fights, in particularly the Jan Blachowicz fight, where he could have implemented a much more wrestling heavy approach earlier in the fight, and probably had a much more or had a decisive win against Jan. Ultimately, went to a draw, but again, just these moments where there just doesn't seem to be any sense of urgency from him has seemed to cost him in the past. And there was a part of me when I was watching that fifth round thinking that this is going to cost him. This is going to cost Ankalaev because he didn't fight with much urgency. And if you go back round by round, I mean, guys, no matter how you score it, I mean, you can't deny that round by round, each round was pretty close. Some rounds definitely closer than others, but when round by round, when the fights are that close, and then the unpredictability of the judges, you got to go for it. And I really thought that the lack of urgency that Ankalaev showed in that fifth round, I really thought was going to cost him because I did in fact score that fifth and final round for Alex, um, and the previous round I scored for Ankalaev. So just for full clarity, I did score rounds upon second rewatch 1, 3, 5 for Alex. I scored rounds 2 and 4 for Ankalaev. Um, but that fifth round was also pretty close. I thought that round four, which is the round where Ankalaev really implemented that more grappling heavy approach. I mean, he went in for multiple takedowns, 12, ultimately didn't get any. I thought Alex did a good job of really hoisting up that grip that Ankalaev had to try to mitigate the takedowns, which was very effective. But in that fourth round, I mean, just the control and the clinch won him that round. And guys, sometimes I mean you win rounds however you can. I mean, I'm certainly not going to hold it against Ankalaev for um, not just going toe to toe with him from first round to fifth round. I mean, that's just not smart. I mean, you got to give him some different looks. You got to win rounds however you can, and he did. Um, and then we get to that fifth round where I thought Alex definitely had the bigger moments. I thought that head kick um, that clearly put him on the back foot after that, and then there was a couple really stiff shots, some couple of jabs that really seemed to connect really well. I thought Alex, by and large, had the bigger moments in the fifth round. So I do think that though that third round out of the 3 rounds I scored for Alex was the most challenging one for me to give him. I thought rounds 1 and 5 were pretty clear for Alex, 2 and 4 pretty clear for Ankalaev, and like most of you out there, that third round. And I'll go back and rewatch it again. But upon rewatch, I had Alex edging it out just a little bit. But again, guys, I'm not gonna be sitting here screaming screaming robbery. No. Ankalaev had a pretty good game plan. Um, and that was without even landing any of the takedowns. Um, Alex looked uncomfortable a lot of the fight. Again, didn't had a really hard time getting out of first gear. Now, would that make sense? Um, that maybe he was dealing with some injuries, that maybe he was dealing with some sort of sickness. Sure, but we got to also give some credit to Ankalaev, right? I mean, I tend to think that a lot of that was more of him making him uncomfortable as opposed to Alex going into that fight dealing with multiple things that affected him in the fight. And you guys, I'm a huge Alex fan. I love Alex. But I'm not going to be here screaming robbery. Ankalaev is the champ. The judges scored it for Ankalaev. 2 out of the 3 judges gave it to him 3 rounds to two, and then I think Sal D'Amato gave him four rounds for Ankalaev. And is that crazy either? No. I mean, it's one of those fights where it's like you could turn in multiple scorecards for different guys, and really, it's not crazy, right? And that's the name of the game. Some of my favorite fighters have been um, on the receiving end of that, right? It just kind of it comes with the territory as fight fans, right? The good news is, though, if you are an Alex fan, it does seem to be the consensus, and even Dana said as much in the post-fight press conference that they're looking at doing the rematch. And I do hope, though, if Alex was dealing with some injuries and some sort of sickness, I really do hope he takes the time to address that because, just like you guys, I don't want to see these guys unless they are at full capacity, full speed ahead, all engines go. I want to see these guys at their absolute best, and that's not to say they weren't during this fight, but upon hearing those reports, it does kind of make you question and kind of wonder, like, was Alex at his best going with this, right? But right now, you got to tip your hat to Ankalaev. He is the champion, a deserving champion. Um, but further credit to Ankalaev that when he was asked about a potential rematch with Alex, he said, "Yeah, he said, yeah, let's do it, let's do it. Send the paperwork, let's set a date, and let's make it happen." So, and we've seen the opposite in the past with new champions, right? They finally get over that hurdle, they finally get the belt, and then they want to coast and they want to take time off. They're, oh no, oh no, he doesn't get a rematch. No rematch over my dead body, not going to happen. No, and then they start, listing guys that are maybe more favorable matchups for them, right? But the rematch is the fight to make. I think that's what the fans want. I mean, why wouldn't the UFC want that, right? I mean, a rematch would be huge. Um, probably do some good pay-per-view numbers as well. So I very much look forward to the rematch. And I do hope that, again, both guys come in healthy, come in, all engines go, all systems go, and deliver a good fight. But right now, you got to tip your hat to Ankalaev. He is the champion. And you got to tip your cap to Alex too. He wasn't making excuses after the fight. He wasn't screaming robbery himself. His team wasn't. He went back and celebrated with his family, and he said, "Hey, look, I still this is what it's all about. I got my kids here. I got my family here. We're having some pizza, right?" And he's winning in life. What can you say? I mean, look at his trajectory. Who could have predicted this? If Alex were to stop fighting today, if we look back on his career, who could have predicted this trajectory for him? I mean, he just came in and flipped the UFC upside down. And, I know a lot of it was the story between the history between him and Izzy, which, of course, Izzy is a huge piece of that story. So you got to give credit to him, too. But I mean, who could have predicted that, right? This kickboxer that doesn't say a whole lot, right? That just took the UFC by storm, created a massive fan base for him, myself included. I mean, his there's if he stops fighting today, he has definitely carved out himself an Alex Pereira era that we can look back on in UFC history and say, hey, remember the Alex Pereira era? How special that was, how fun that was, right? All the cool moments he gave us, right? So, you know, Alex is Alex is going to be fine regardless. I look forward to the rematch, but you got to tip your hat to Ankalaev, the new champion. Congratulations to Magomed Ankalaev. We look forward to the rematch. Moving on. Co-main event, Justin Gaethje versus Rafael Fiziev. Guys, another fight upon rewatch to where, I mean, I did not change my opinion as far as who I thought won and lost. Watching that fight, I thought Gaethje clearly won the fight. Upon rewatch, I thought Gaethje clearly won. But I was surprised how close the second round up until the Gaethje knockdown, that nasty uppercut he landed on him. But that third round too. That third round was closer than I remember upon initial watch. But it was interesting because Fiziev implemented an interesting approach in that first round, and I remember thinking like, okay, so if Fiziev is going to win, this is the kind of things he has to do. He's got to mix it up a little bit. He's got to get some different looks in. He can't just go toe to toe with Gaethje. I mean, that typically doesn't end well for most guys. The Max Holloway fight notwithstanding, but he was able to land a couple takedowns on him in that first round, and he got him in that weird reverse triangle position, which I was like, whoa, like, who saw that coming, right? He landed two takedowns and was much more measured, much more calculated, picked his strikes a little more carefully, and I thought clearly won that first round. And then we get to the second round, and Fiziev continued to do good work, and that round was much more tit for tat, back and forth. Fiziev and his kicks, man, he was landing some nasty body kicks. And then before the Gaethje knockdown, there was a moment where Fiziev landed a pretty nasty strike, and it clearly rattled Gaethje. And I've seen that before, and it reminded me of a fight when he fought Poirier the first time. Because when Justin gets hurt on the feet, when he gets a little wobbled, he will his legs will kind of go a little bit, but then combined with that, he likes to do this. Come on, right? As he's still like wobble, and that's when you know he's hurt. Um, in that first Poirier fight, the same thing happened. Poirier landed a nasty straight, boom, and then it clearly wobbled Gaethje, and then he was still going like this. Come on, right? The difference though is that Dustin saw that and just blitzed him, went right at him, and ultimately got the finish. Fiziev almost looked a little like, "Whoa, did I just hurt him?" kind of thing. And if you give Gaethje any time to get his wits about him, to collect himself, he's right back in it. He's right back on you. And that's what happened. I thought Fiziev had a moment right there where he could have poured it on him a little more. And, who knows what would have happened. But up until that point, Fiziev, I thought, was pretty comfortably winning that fight. He was winning the second round up until that knockdown. And then after that, I mean, you score a knockdown and then the damage that occurred after that. And before that, too, it wasn't necessarily that Fiziev was dominating that second round. There was a lot of back and forth. Both guys were landing some good shots. But, I mean, you score a knockdown. I mean, most of the time, a guy's going to win that round. And that ultimately swayed that round, in my opinion, for Gaethje. And then we get to the third round. Fiziev continued to do really good work to the body. But then about probably a little bit under midway through that third round, you could really see Fiziev started to fade. And that was when Gaethje just started doing that work, very similar to their first fight. There was a lot of parallels from that first fight to this fight. And Gaethje did not get tired, and he just continued to do that good work. He continued to land some good shots from the clinch, a lot of dirty boxing. And if you get in that dirty boxing range with Gaethje and you start letting him land those uppercuts and those knees, it's gonna be a long night. And then I think he landed that head kick too. Wasn't a clean head kick, but it did cause some damage to Fiziev. But yeah, and then that was pretty much all she wrote. Gaethje had the bigger moments in that third round, and ultimately, um, I thought it was the correct score. The 29-28 in favor of Justin Gaethje. Man, Justin Gaethje, just when people write him off, just when people count him out. I mean, it wasn't that long ago we saw him, on the receiving end of just a nasty knockout from Max Holloway, and then a little over a year later, still turning in great performances, still wowing us, still amazing us. I mean, you gotta love. you gotta love Justin Gaethje. The guy is just as game as it gets, and upon the original, his original opponent Dan Hooker, falling out of this contest. I mean, he could have played the game. He's I'm gonna hold off. I'm gonna wait. I don't want to fight a different opponent. I mean, God knows the guy's earned it. I mean, the guy's always game. The guy is always just turning in just classic banger after classic banger for us, time and time and time again, right? I mean, if anyone's earned a right to be a little picky, I mean, come on, Gaethje's gonna be one of them, right? But what does he say? Oh, Fizzy Part 2? Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. You know, with really not a whole lot to gain from winning against him, right? But still took it. Definitely had much more to gain in defeating Dan Hooker than Fiziev. But still, nevertheless, turned in a great performance. And, he's going to be off to bigger and better things. The question is now what, right? The ever, um, the ever pursuing conundrum of the lightweight division, right? Because we have guys that are just still at the peak of their powers. There's contenders left and right, and of course we have the champion Makachev, right? Who and now we've just inserted Ilya Taporia in the mix, which certainly doesn't make things easier as far as potential matchmaking and and things like that. Um, but I wouldn't mind them rebooking the Dan Hooker fight. He has said that he doesn't really want the Poirier retirement fight. Um, he's called for the championship. He's called for the belt. Would I hate it if they booked that fight? No, I wouldn't. I mean, I think Gaethje is, what is he, third? I think he ranked third right now. I mean, you could do that fight, right? You could do Gaethje versus Islam. I mean, and I'm not going to get into like a breakdown analysis of that, right? But I mean, if they were to book that fight, you're not going to hear any complaints from me. There's a lot of ways you could go with Gaethje. You could do him versus Charles Part 2. There's been talk of him welcoming Ilya Taporia into lightweight, but Ilya seems to be standing pretty firm on the fact that um, he wants Makachev. He wants that immediate championship fight. So we'll see what happens. And it was interesting. Fiziev talked about him potentially moving down to featherweight. Um, I don't hate that. Uh, I think it could inject another potential, contender into featherweight. And Fiziev, I mean, he's another guy that brings it, right? Um, he's a guy that no matter what weight class you put him in, I mean, he's going to deliver the bangers, right? So, um, this is a performance he can definitely hold his head up high on, right? He took it on short notice. I thought Fiziev would get the best of him. I thought he would make some adjustments. I was wrong in my prediction. Matter of fact, I went one for four, one for however many. I got one right. I got one right in the main card. So I did not do well in my predictions. I posted them on X when I was in Mexico, but yeah, I did not fare well. So I picked Alex to win. He lost. I picked Fiziev to get it done. And after that first round, I felt pretty confident. I thought Fiziev, hey, if he can continue to implement this game plan, he can do it. But Justin Gaethje just does Justin Gaethje things. So hats off to Justin Gaethje. And then we had in the previous fight, I believe I might be getting these out of order, but we had Jalen Turner versus Ignacio Bahamondes. My lone prediction that I got correct, um, and I went back and forth on that one also. And of course, we know what happened. I mean, this one ended pretty quick. Ignacio sunk in that triangle. Got the tap from Turner. Um, Not a whole lot of analysis in this fight. I think the analysis really comes because of what Turner had to say post fight, which was that he has been dealing with some mental health things, that he knew he wasn't really all in for this fight. Um, when Jalen Turner's on, I mean, he can beat anybody. But we have seen the inconsistencies. We have seen some of the questionable decision making um, that has led to the talent not matching the results, right? Um, I mean, there was a time when he was looking like the next big thing, and he's still 29, so I mean, who's to say that he still couldn't get there, right? But clearly not in a great spot, which he alluded to that post fight. But regardless, I thought Ignacio Bahamondes. I picked because of some of the things just Jalen Turner, rather, I'm sorry, alluded to in the post fight. You kind of had that feeling actually before this that because of Jalen Turner's previous losses, that it just had to have been frustrating for him. I mean, you go back to UFC 300 in that Moicano loss, right? Where I mean, he had Moicano just dead to rights. A couple more follow up strikes would have cashed in my parlay, but that's okay. But yeah, you just got a sense that like, man, this has got to be frustrating for him just to have been so close during certain fights. And then the Dan Hooker fight too, where he was doing some really good work against Dan Hooker, and then Hooker just stormed back and really stole that one from him. And you kind of put yourself in Jalen Turner's shoes, and he was probably almost thinking like, man, like what do I got to do? What do I got to do to get this done, right? And so I really thought that going into this, Ignacio Bahamondes is just peaking. He's going to the moon, right? I mean, his trajectory is looking good, and I just thought it was just a tale of two trajectories. I thought it was going to be competitive. It was a fight that I kind of went back and forth on, but I really picked just based on the fact that, man, Bahamondes right now his trajectory is going one way. Excuse me. Turner's was going another, and all of that was pretty much affirmed in Jalen Turner's post fight. I mean, on paper, based on ability, I mean, he probably should have beaten Bahamondes, but you know, Ignacio Bahamondes, man, he's surging right now. He really is. He's really injected himself into that lightweight division in the top 15. So he's got a bright future ahead of him. He's got fast hands. He's got power. He's tough. He can do it all. And he just finished Jalen Turner on the ground with that triangle choke. There was some pretty harsh criticisms of Jalen Turner as far as his lack of um, defensive awareness when he was put in that triangle choke. Because I think initially it almost looked like it was like, okay, well, it's not sunken all the way, and like Turner just makes some adjustments to the grips, and he doesn't allow Bahamondes to get the other grip, then he should be good. And there were some commentators post fight that almost made it sound like Turner just kind of conceded it. They was like, okay, like I'm over it. I don't even care. I'm going to give Bahamondes more credit than that. I thought that he did. I thought that he implemented what he wanted to implement, and I thought that he had a game plan, and I thought he was able to execute it. I don't think it was just by chance that he just fell into a triangle. And it's like, oh yeah, here and here. I'm going to give it to you because I'm over it and I don't want to be in here anymore. No, I'm going to give him more credit than that. So if in fact Jalen Turner does retire, he's provided us with some great fights, some bangers over the years, and I hope he finds peace and fulfillment with whatever he's struggling with. Because mental health is real; it's no joke, and I can speak on that firsthand. So, uh, and combine that with being in the public eye, being open to all kinds of scrutiny, the fans. I mean, MMA fan base can be pretty brutal at times. Jalen Turner seems to be pretty much, by and large, liked very well by the fan base, but MMA isn't always the source of the mental health hub or openness for such things. So, regardless how you feel about that, I do hope Jalen Turner finds peace in whatever life brings him next. And Bahamondes, we'll see what's next for him. But that was a great fight. I'm sorry. Well, it was a great performance rather by Bahamondes, and should bring him bigger opportunities to come. Moving on, Amanda Lemos versus Yasmin Lucindo. Guys, what a dud. What a dud that was. I also, another fight I got wrong. I picked Yasmin Lucindo. I thought she would get it done. I thought she was surging. I thought her more recent body of work was more impressive than Amanda Lemos. Um, Amanda Lemos got the win. What more can we say? I mean, it was not a good fight. It was a fight that was won um, by means of implementing whatever you could to get the job done. But by no means a banger, by no means even a technical thriller. It was just, it didn't really particularly look like either uh, of the women really wanted to go all in the fight. There was a lot of hesitation from both fighters. I'm not even going to get into analysis of it a whole lot because it was such a dud. I mean, congratulations to Amanda Lemos. Um, Yasmin Lucindo, I was disappointed. I thought she looked like a shell of herself based on what I had seen from her previous. She'll bounce back. She's still young. She's got a lot of fights under her belt for being as young as she is, but she can't turn in too many more performances like that. Otherwise, she will very much be forgotten in that division. So, moving on. Opening fight of the main card Mauricio Rufy against Bobby Green. Another fight I got wrong. I picked Bobby Green to win this fight. Uh, he did not, and that's putting it lightly. He got viciously KO'd by a spinning heel kick. Highlight reel kick from Mauricio Rufy. This one was also kind of tough for me to pick. Bobby Green lives and dies by the sword. He lives and dies with his hands hanging at his hips. And we've seen it work for him, and we've seen it work against him. A good example of that, a couple good examples of that, we saw it work really well for him in the Jim Miller fight against UFC 300, where he was just doing whatever he wanted to Jim. We saw it work for him when he um, defeated Grant Dawson and knocked him out. But then we've also seen it when he's fought the likes of Drew Dober, where it's working for him at first. You know, he's moving and he's throwing that jab from the hip and he's popping Drew Dober. But then Drew Dober lands that boom and just finishes him, right? And that's just how Bobby King Green has always fought, and I love him for it. I'm a huge fan of his. Um, he is getting up there in age, and so this was another one where I struggled with my pick, but I thought that I thought that he could turn in. Sorry about that, guys. Technical difficulties. Back to the video. We're going to wrap it up pretty quickly here. But yeah, we're talking about the Mauricio Rufy versus Bobby King Green fight. I thought that Bobby had one more great performance um, in him. That's not to say that's not to say that he won't have great performances in the future, but I did think that he had one more great performance against a surging contender where he might be able to play spoiler, where he might be able to play not necessarily the fraud check guy, but I thought that he had the goods still, even at his age, to at least make this a much more competitive fight. But Mauricio Rufy had something to say about that. He finished him easily, and you know that kick was tailor made for somebody like King Green. Um, because again, we were just talking about earlier how he always fights with his hands at his hips, which does make him susceptible to hit kicks. Obviously, I mean, this is a guy that rarely puts a guard up. He's relied on quickness, movements, which has served him pretty well in the past, much more than most guys would have, to be honest. But this just wasn't going to work against Mauricio Rufy. Ironically, I say that having picked King Green to win this fight. Um, I didn't think it would end quite like that, though. I thought that this would be much more competitive. I thought that King Green would test him much more. But I mean, what more can you ask of Mauricio Rufy, right? Um, I think he is now deserving of someone in the top 15. Let's do it. Let's see if he's got the goods. I've heard a lot of people calling for him to get fraud checked. Um, People going as far as to say, "Oh, I can't wait till these fight nerd guys get fraud checked." Um, and even if he loses, I mean, I don't know where we start getting this, fraud check thing. I mean, it seems like every time a guy comes in with some hype, um, that turns in early great performances. I mean, and that does what we, I mean, that exceeds expectations. Guys that are doing what they're supposed to do, win fights. Um, there seems to be this segment of the fan base that can't wait for them to get fraud checked, or once they fight a guy that's this, once they fight a guy that's this style. Well, yeah, sure. I mean, that could happen, but that's also the fight game. I mean, that's what's so cool. That's what we love about the sport. That on any given night, it boils down to the fact that this is a fight, and anything can happen in a fight. Um, let's give him Grant Dawson. Let's see how he does against a guy with a wrestling heavy approach. I'd be down for that. Now, could we book him in another banger against another stand up guy? Sure, we could. But if we really do want to see if he can really break through to the top 15 and beyond, it's only a matter of time before he is going to have to face guys with a much more wrestling heavy approach. Let's give him Grant Dawson and see how he does. Grant Dawson versus Mauricio Rufy. I'm all for it. As far as King Green goes, I think the days of him fighting up and coming contenders, um, I think are pretty much over with. It seems that he still very wants to be around in the fight game. So let's give him some fun fights. Let's give him some fights where he can make some good money, where it's going to be a good matchup to where both guys are going to be competitive. Um, like I was talking about him fighting Jim Miller. That's the kind of guys now that he should be fighting. Um, Guys outside of the top 15, guys that have maybe been around for quite a while, but maybe have broken through at one point, but then dropped out of the rankings. But guys that have stood the test of time. Um, but he really shouldn't be being used anymore as a test for up and coming contenders anymore. I think Bobby has earned the right to be booked in fun, exciting, money making matchups from now on. I think he deserves that. I think he really does. Um, a couple years ago, I mean, man, he broke through. He broke through to that top 15. I mean, when no one really saw that coming. So, credit to him. Credit to um, his determination and hanging around the fight game this long. You got to tip your hat to Bobby King Green. We love King Green over here at MMA After Dark. So didn't work out for him this time, unfortunately. Um, and that's pretty much the story of the main card of UFC 313. There were some interesting things that happened post fight, and I'm not going to get into it too much, but I'm just going to end on this with a lot of people had MMA social media was buzzing over Alex Pereira's ex posting a video congratulating Magomed Ankalaev, but very much taking shots at Alex. No more Shama, karma, kind of thing, and just really just with dare I say, evil smile. Just you could tell, just loving every minute of it. And I don't think Alex has even taken the time to respond, but it was interesting because even when Alex was with her, I mean, she wasn't really in the public eye a whole lot. I mean, she joined him a little bit, in cage, post fight on a few occasions, but I mean, when he cut things off with her, I mean, no one seemed to bat an eye as far as thinking that much into it. Say, oh, okay, well, yeah, that's that, right? I mean, and and here she uh, shows back up out of nowhere, of course, only to celebrate. Sorry about that, guys. More technical difficulties. I'm still getting used to this streaming stuff. Okay, this is not my day job, so I promise I'll get better at this. But yeah, just wrapping up here with that Alex Pereira's ex, tweeting, or putting up that video post fight, really sticking the knife in the wound. You know, um, credit to Alex. So I mean, he didn't pay any mind to it. You know, um, I'm not sure what she's thinking though. I mean, Alex Pereira's fan base is some of the most dedicated, loyal fans, and so he was probably thinking like, oh, I don't have to take care of that. My fans will take care of it for me. But not only did his fans take take care of it for him, I don't know if any of you guys saw this out there. That the notorious one, Conor McGregor, had quite a response to the video. I'm not gonna say what he wrote, but I mean, if you haven't seen it, look it up. I mean, it's classic 2025 unhinged Conor McGregor. I mean, that's what you're getting from Conor McGregor these days. But the backup we didn't know we needed, right, for Team Chama, right? So he had some interesting things to say about her. Very very short and to the point was Conor McGregor in his response of Alex Pereira's ex ridiculing him post fight. So if you haven't seen that, look it up. I'm not gonna say what he said, but it was pretty funny. Um, but yeah, guys. Anyway, thanks so much for joining me for this episode of MMA After Dark. I'm sorry I'm late with this post-fight analysis, but I wanted to get it in just the same because these were some important fights. These were some big fights with a lot of future implications moving forward. So I will be more consistent and regular. Follow me on the socials on X at MMA After Dark. Again, tap that like button, hit that subscribe button. Follow me on this adventure with you guys on the MMA journey that we all share together. Again, guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for liking and subscribing. I will see you guys next time on MMA After Dark. Take care.